Today we are talking about what you can do to drive your organization towards a more data-driven culture. Starting with what are the challenges, how do you overcome those challenges, and how do you communicate the vision to your colleagues and also to your leadership. I think it's important to recognize, first of all, that analytics maturity is not always something that's driven from the top down, that comes from leadership directly. But it also means there's an opportunity. You don't have to be a senior leader in your company to catalyze change. In fact, the driving force behind statistical enablement often comes from individuals who are doing the work, digging into the data, and using JMP. And that's really one of the reasons that we're here at Discovery Summit every year. We're bringing together people from different industries to share advice and talk through some of those change management challenges. So if you hear a good idea, or if you have heard a good idea this week, borrow it for sure. So that's what we're doing this morning. We've invited 3 speakers to share with you some of the lessons they've learned and are still learning about what it takes to advocate for analytics. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Christian Bertelsen. Christian serves as a senior process developer at Arla Foods. And over a span of 7 years at Arla's Innovation Center, he's developed a passion for designing experiments, adopting emergent technologies, and fine-tuning processes. And he's committed to assisting others in adopting these methodologies, and of course, harnessing the power of data analytics in JMP. So please welcome Christian. Welcome.
Thanks.
All right, so to get us started, I thought maybe you could think back to your initial exposure to design of experiments and collaboration with Arla when you were still in graduate school. So tell us a little bit about one of the early milestone projects that I heard resulted in €500,000 capital expenditure investment.
Yes, sure, gladly. So during my graduate studies, I was introduced to DOE and statistics through several courses like most other engineers. And I had a fantastic professor at the time who actually came from industry, many years in industry, and he was so good at relating the theory to actually real-world cases. And that also quickly became useful for myself during my master thesis, which I did in collaboration with Arla, because I really wanted to apply this in the work I was doing there. So I proactively sought guidance on how to do this internally. And fortunately enough, I was receiving training from a team called Manufacturing Intelligence in Arla, who also introduced me to JMP. Otherwise, I could have probably ended up using Minitab or any other program. So that was a big milestone, I think, for this at least. And in my thesis, I demonstrated, so basically we were screening for this new equipment that was sort of being meant as an add-on to a production line. And by using, it was a simple DOE of just 2 process factors. And by tweaking that right, we could actually save the dairy quite a few money on this. And it was a rather small capital investment compared to the full line right. And I think I still remember presenting my master's, and it was not the exam that was the best part. It was actually presenting the data to the dairy right, and then getting that feeling of all the skills you had learned over the university, you could actually apply that in the real world. I think that was a great first experience, at least using DOE and JMP also.
So you were clearly sold at that stage, which is great. So I'm wondering now to kind of bring us ahead a few years, to contrast that kind of first milestone. I wonder if you could just share a little bit about a more recent memorable project.
Yes, for sure. So 2 years ago, I was part of starting an internal technology project that involved 2 of our dairies that were producing the same product, but with quite distinct processing lines and equipment. And we wanted to know, sort of with this project, wanting to get this deeper process understanding, and especially knowing how the process is affecting these key functionality parameters of this product. And by using, of course, various input from different departments, of course also the dairy involved, we started to conduct these DOE trials using all the great tools in JMP, like the screening platform. One of my favorite tools is the extrapolation control, where you can really see, okay, where is the model maybe missing some data? So we kept augmenting this design for quite a while, and we also did some rather unusual trials, if you ask the dairy. All of this is, of course, happening in a pilot scale, so it doesn't cost that much money, but we ended up finding that if one of the dairies changed just 2 very simple process settings, they could actually significantly enhance this functionality parameter. And that was actually one that our new product development had tried to solve for a while, using other ingredients, trying new things. So, and the other thing was that it was an area where we were not performing as well as the competitors. So I think the best thing about that project was that it didn't cost anything to change this, right? We could just tweak the current production line at the dairy, changing these 2 settings, and then getting it right. And then we scaled it up, going from pilot to production, going from these small 30-liter trials to minimum 30 tons, right? So that was quite a project, I would say.
I might agree there. At what point did you realize that model had the potential to kind of scale beyond this single use case? Like, what were the hallmarks that you could look to as evidence that a particular success is replicable at scale?
Yep. So I think there's 2 things. One of them is at least a key hallmark of this replica, to say, was this consistent measurement that our science team does. So one thing was testing the functionality, but we did a lot of other physical, chemical measurements behind the scene to sort of understand what was actually happening. And I think it was actually their data that gave us that confidence, right? Because when we scaled it up the first time, the similarity between those physical measurements was almost identical, right? So, and that doesn't happen that often, I can tell you. Going from pilot to large, that's uncommon, I would say, almost. So following that initial large-scale trial, we tried to extend, why don't we try this on new recipes? So still almost the same product, right? But maybe the ingredients are slightly different. And interestingly enough, this positive correlation that we have observed was almost the same for these new recipes as well. And maybe not only showing the model's efficacy, but also that it could be adapted across these different SKUs at the dairy. So I think it was really good to see that the original model or recipe that we were tweaking could actually work beyond this initial scope and improve several SKUs at the dairy with the same 2 process steps, actually. So,
how did you pitch this vision to R&D leadership? What communication strategies have you found to be effective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for this, I would say that there are, again, 2 things, because for this particular project, we always had quarterly meetings, updating that was usually always a technical meeting. So science personnel, process, dairies involved. So that was usually rather long, I think 2-3 hour sessions, really discussing the model and the data from all the different departments. And then one of the directors who attended this was quite excited. So she showed her boss, one of our VPs in innovation, and she watched this poor woman to watch this 3-hour Teams recording. And I think everyone that is not the most fun thing, right? So after her feedback, we definitely realized, if we want to communicate upwards, we need to simplify this. So we spend a lot of time with the same director, bringing all this, months of presentations down to this concise 15-minute version, right? Where it was really the simple things, showing what can we do. And that resonated really well with the same VP. And we ended up also presenting the same presentation to our CMO, and I think I have since presented this project, I don't know, more than 15 times in Arla, always trying to tailor-make the presentation. I've also tried, where it gets even more nerdy, when I went back to that manufacturing intelligence who taught me in the beginning. There you can almost, there are 15 data scientists, right? So that was the opposite, right? But it really means something how you communicate, for sure.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the hardest challenge.
It is.
So adopting new methods, as you've said, requires buy-in, whether in tools or training or other resources. And demonstrating value can be really crucial when you're engaging with those stakeholders who are part of the culture change. I'm wondering if you could share some examples of what really resonated with leaders at Arla.
Yeah, sure. So through the same project we just talked about before, right, we demonstrated how these really simple adjustments that were basically, you say, grounded in a better understanding of the process could lead to these substantial performance enhancement. And the funny thing was that it was not new knowledge that we have generated. There was by no means new knowledge. So we have basically just maybe taking the right data and applying it in the right place for this project. And I still have a saved recording from one of these Teams meetings where there was a vice president from supply chain who attended, and he said afterwards, and it's not to brag, but he said, I honestly think this is one of the best data-driven projects he had seen for a while, like in many years. And the best thing about this guy was that he was the kind of person who could take decisions. He was also probably the first guy who said, why don't we just scale this right now, right? He was really eager to try this in large scale and get these improvements going, right? And I think what really resonated with him and what brought value to him was the simplicity, that we didn't ask for a huge cap investment or a new production line or a new equipment. We just tweaked what we already had and then solved the problem. And I think that was really where he saw the value in this, right?
Have there been any major setbacks or challenges that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, so I've used DOE throughout these 7 years in Arla, and yeah, I think it takes a while, right, with these. I've tried both cases of where, for example, we did a DOE, and we didn't uncover any significant factor, right? And maybe it was because we didn't understand the equipment or the process right. But the difference was here that now we could actually document that really clearly, okay, this isn't working. And then we could relocate or allocate our resources to other, maybe more promising ideas much more earlier compared to, I call it this endless circle of one factor at a time, right? Where you just keep going and not really getting anywhere. And I think I've also tried the opposite, where we had a project that worked and gave good result, and we think, oh, this is going to be really nice, right? And then due to some geopolitical, that was actually Corona at that time, or maybe the marketing spending project was cut, so the project was closed, right? And you just spent almost a year developing this, right? So that can be really frustrating if you actually have the results, right? But I think luckily there's always a new problem or area to look into when you work in innovation, and that is, for me personally, a key driver. This keep learning new stuff every day. That's what gets me to work, I would say.
How about the next major challenge that you're kind of anticipating as far as Arla's path to full analytics maturity?
Yeah, I think there are like two things to this question, because the next goal for me personally is certainly being better at demonstrating the, you could say, return of investment of using DOE compared to one factor at a time, because how can we actually properly show like the number of trials we would save using DOE compared to the usual approach, and also sort of the accelerated progress that usually comes with it, right? That you use fewer trials, you get the product faster to market. And I would really like to be able to showcase these calculations. And the funny thing is, I actually showed my manager a full presentation from last year's Discovery Summit given by Evan Cook. I don't know if he's here, but I showed him this presentation, and my manager said, this is exactly what we need to show management, right? Some of these calculations he had from Unilever. And then I think secondly, there's also a lot of things happening with the whole digital transformation in Arla, such as better sensors, smarter data collection, like the whole product traceability from the milk intake to the final product. So I think if we could establish this more, you could say, automatic and more solid data foundation, that would be really crucial to Arla's analytical maturity. And if you then combine that with the ways of working and using DOE, then I think there's a lot of good things coming, actually.
Okay, last question. I wanted to talk about future-proofing.
Yeah.
So what's your strategy for ensuring that responsibility for this analytics transformation is kind of spread across the organization in a way that continuity isn't jeopardized?
Exactly. So I think for this, continuity in the transformation, I'm actively trying, of course, to spread DOE, both within my own team, but also other departments. So I provide one-to-one training, share all my learning resources from the JUMP community, because I personally believe, at least in our company, that it's easier to train people to use DOE who already have the domain knowledge, right? If you have 10 years of domain knowledge, that takes a while to develop, right? And we also strive, of course, to keep on presenting cases like the project I've talked about today, right, through science talks, team sharing, newsletters. And another aspect of getting more people involved is also avoiding this risk of being really dependent on a few people. I can, by heart, tell you, I'm still missing our leading statistician guy from the science team who left 3 years ago. He left like a huge gap at that time, right? And I think we have tried to replace him with more people coming in, right? But if you're dependent on very few people and they decide to go to another company, that can set you back a lot, right? So I think it's really important that you get more and more people involved into this so you avoid this risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining
really
us.
Glad being
here. He'll be here all week, everyone, so ask lots of questions. So.
Yes. Sure.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So next, please welcome Mariana Toft. Mariana is a renowned statistician with over 20 years of experience. She has a PhD in chemometrics and spectroscopy and a master's in applied statistics and machine learning. At Novonesis, her team supports the entire organization through training, individualized support, and of course, project collaborations. So please welcome Mariana. So, my understanding is that roughly 10% of employees at Novonesis currently have JUMP licenses, and that really JUMP is kind of in use across all parts of the company, with a couple of exceptions. And I'm wondering, what's your strategy for ensuring that the benefits of JUMP are really kind of maximized across all of those areas of the business?
Yeah, you're right. In Novonesis, we have about 10,000 employees, and we have roughly 1,000 licenses. So it's quite a bit, and it's also spread very wide. We are a global company, so it's also from east to west and north to south. So it's a big community to support. I'm part of this team, stat team. We are 2 statisticians who support the entire company with statistics, mainly the JUMP users, though. We teach and support chemists, engineers, scientists with JUMP. And our strategy is that, well, first of all, we don't control who does what, who uses JUMP, who uses something else, who does statistics at all. But what we do is that we offer our courses and our support to all the company, to the entire company. And then it's up to the single scientist, the single department, the single area to actually make sure that it's used. So we don't have a strategy. Maybe the company has a strategy, but it's not something that we drive specifically. We just support and foster this community.
So I wanted to ask about bridging the statistics knowledge gap. Because with only 2 statisticians, it's like supporting such a diverse group of scientists, many without prior statistical training. How do you balance that foundational education with more advanced statistical support?
We have a lot of courses that we teach. We teach 7 different courses internally, from the most simple, just getting data into JUMP and making a graph, to the more advanced. So we actually teach a very broad range. The most basic have much more participants, because that's where people start, and some only get so far and some go all the way. But we also function as internal consultants. So people usually go to our courses and then they come back to us for help. How do I exactly apply this on my problem? So that's one way we move them a little bit further up the ladder. And also, well, it's more fun for us because we support them at a higher level than just how do I make a t-test between these two sets of data. And we have the principle that we don't do statistics for people. We teach them to do it themselves. We help them do it themselves. So that's how we can even also with some people go to a very high level, very advanced, something that we really struggle with sometimes. And that's a fun tasks.
Can you share some of the key lessons that you've learned when it comes to ensuring that your colleagues retain the knowledge that they learn during these trainings? Like, do you need to have other touch points with them?
Just after the training, they are offered a one-to-one follow-up. If there are many from the same department, we typically group them. Not all take this offer because sometimes with so many users, we also have departments that are self-contained. They just support each other. Sometimes, if we have many people from the same department, we follow up with a department at a department level with regular meetings. If there is a manager support, we also do like come to department meetings and stuff like that. Then if we go more broadly, so not just the courses, we have jump days where you guys from Jump help us, and we have some webinars where we also try to develop the organization. And then we have, very importantly, I think, a big Teams community for Jump. So within our Teams, Microsoft Teams, we have a community where you can ask questions and we post our webinars and so on. So in that way we can support from Denmark, we can support the entire company, and from simple to advanced.
Yeah. What strategies have been most effective in securing executive or buy-in from leadership?
Well, in the way we work, we actually don't need this support because we just teach, we just offer our services, and we let the value speak for itself locally and let the departments decide. But we have experienced that if we have manager support, we can move faster, we can get further and we can move faster. So we had an example a couple of years ago where there was a manager who wanted his entire team trained. And first we started with our basic training. These are online courses. Then we had multiple meetings with some of the scientists to get to know their data, their challenges. We developed some specialized training, and then we went to Brazil because it was a department in Brazil, that didn't hurt. And we did face-to-face training for the last more advanced part, so really getting DOE into their daily work. How exactly do I apply it there? And this manager, well, he gave the time to the scientists to participate in these a lot of days of training, and also continuously asking for DOE, did you do DOE? Can you show me the results? So internally within the department, he supported, and also he actually traveled the world more or less and talked about his department and their great achievements with DOE. They actually go to customers, our end customers, with a DOE in hand and show them this is what happens if we tweak these parameters.
How do you identify when standard tools are insufficient, and what factors influence the decision to invest in developing customized solutions, like, for example, a Jump add-in?
Yeah. We generally divide by people who do very different things from day to day. So a new project is new data, new variables, new everything. You have to start from scratch every time, to people doing repetitive tasks. So if it's more repetitive, then it makes sense to try to automate. We actually do have most people who are doing varying tasks, and that's why Jump is so good, because it's really good for the explorative way of working. But occasionally we have some repetitive tasks, and we don't develop add-ins for people, we help them do it themselves. So we teach GSL, and then we make a co-develop. And currently I'm working on something with a department where we need to do a kind of DOE that Jump doesn't really make, at least it's not out of the box. And so we cannot just teach them DOE and then say, figure it out yourselves. So we are working on making some kind of add-in that both helps them in making the design and also the analysis, which is also not straightforward to teach. So in that case, it's a case where it's so specialized that we need to, and it's advanced, so we will make an add-in for that.
Before we close, I have one last question. What advice would you give to someone who's endeavoring to launch a statistical training program for their organization?
Well, first of all, do it. I think training is fundamental to spreading analytics in an organization. And not only statisticians can teach. So if there's an engineer who knows something and is enthusiastic about it, he should definitely just go ahead and do something. Start simple. And then, of course, think about how people can find your courses. And then I have a very specific recommendation, and that is to do virtual courses. We used to do face-to-face courses, but then it was mainly in Denmark, because we are just 2 statisticians in Denmark. We sometimes were invited, to the US or to China, India, and so on to teach, but it was mainly Denmark. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we changed all our face-to-face courses to be virtual. And I'm not really a believer in online courses where you're just given a package and do it yourself. So rather, we give people access to videos of presentations and demos in JMP. And then we meet for each module of this course, we meet in teams. And there they can ask questions and get answers so that you don't get stuck in the beginning of something you didn't get exactly. And then they do the next module, and then we meet again. So a 2-day face-to-face course becomes a 4-week course, but just with 3 hours work for the participant per week. And also it saves time for us, because a 2-day full face-to-face course would be 16 hours, while in this way it's only 4 hours of my time. And then we do it in the morning Danish time, because then I can have my colleagues from India and China on the call, and I do it in the afternoon, so I have my colleagues from the Americas on the call. And this has made the number of course participants increase dramatically. So in 2014, we actually, 24, we had 280 course participants. We're just 2 people teaching. 280 course participants from 13 different countries and 68 different departments. So it's so much more that you can support doing it this way than just doing face-to-face. And there are pros and cons, but I actually think that the pros of doing it virtual, that people can start the video and stop and think, or go and have a coffee because they're tired, highly outweighs the disadvantages of not having the face-to-face contact with people. So go for virtual courses.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That is great, really great advice. And it's very clear that you're busy.
Yes, yes, we are.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brianna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So next, I would like to welcome Gwenola Nino. For more than 10 years, Gwen has worked for Fujifilm Diosynth on the data science team. She focuses on DOE for process exploration, optimization, qualification, and characterization driven by QBD principles. Nino is passionate about increasing awareness of statistics and analytics through her training program. So please welcome Gwen. So we've known each other for a few years. I've met you around Discovery Summits before. Yeah. So I feel like I can go right in and ask a hard question to start us off. And that is, I just want to know what are some of the key challenges you're facing right now at Fujifilm?
Right, so that's a difficult question to answer because it's a big list. And the list can change, and I'm sure you're going to all recognize some points in that list. So I think if we divide it by 2, there's data challenges, and then there are maybe people challenges. For us, certainly at Fujifilm, an unusual challenge we have is our data sets are small. Believe it or not, we have some scripts that actually have if statements for 2 or only 3 observations to do something different do you do stats on 2 data points? So that's one. I think I speak for everybody when I say our data is coming from scattered places everywhere. And the biopharma, especially when you go from cell line development to full-fledged manufacturing, is so many instruments and systems, and many of them have proprietary systems. So all the exports and the data formats are different. We use small bioreactors, and the 15 milliliters and 250 milliliters, they have different outputs, completely different data settings. I talk to my colleagues, and something that comes up that I didn't think about is data integrity. Different teams, different functions have different data integrity requirements. So we'll say that for the data. Then people, you know that. People are scared of math and stats. So when you try to say, let's do some stats, they're just like, ooh, okay. And then people are very used to Excel, and there's a big reticence to go away from Excel, and I get it, I like Excel too. And sometimes even if they understand JMP is better for some things, they slip back into Excel really easily. And I think this goes hand in hand with getting your staff engaged long term. They'll be impressed with one analysis and really buy in, do it for a few weeks, few months, and then again they slip back into their habits. And lastly, getting management buy-in can be really difficult.
Yeah, I think all of those are very resonant things. A lot of those kind of, we're talking about data quality, and I think data is often overlooked as kind of a strategic asset in the business, but also that business value isn't derived from just having a bunch of data, it's derived from having an understanding of the data. So how do you really ensure that you're collecting the right data, collecting data in a structure that you can actually use it?
We don't always, is the answer. So when you talk about data quality, it really depends who you talk to. So if you talk to maybe even my manager in data science or people in regulatory, for them data quality is data that really represents your processes and your system. It has to be accurate, it has to be precise, and it has to be spot on. But of course, for me as a statistician, a good quality data is data that varies when you vary the inputs, and data that's stable when you don't, so at set points. So thankfully, a lot of people come to us before setting experiments, so we're able to tell them how to run, and then we get structured data that has this golden signal to noise ratio, and we can analyze it. But a lot of people come to us and plop some data on my desk, and they're like, I kid you not, they say, do some magic. And I'm like, stats is magical, but it's not magic. It doesn't work that way. And last week we had a really interesting conversation with our Japanese colleagues. Although they're not Fujifilm Diosynths, they have a specialized team that does data analytics and machine learning. And they had gone to Denmark first, and Denmark is a manufacturing site. And they have very good quality data. Everything comes in and out at the same rate, and everything is beautiful and perfect. And the Japanese people told them, we can't do anything with this because your data is bad data because it doesn't vary. So we can provide those people's data that varies because we do a bit of internal development. But yeah, data quality is different for everyone.
My understanding is that Fujifilm has grown rather quickly through multiple acquisitions over the last decade or two. And your team has the challenge of providing analytical support to an organization that's not just growing linearly in its collective statistical expertise. So talk me through what it really means for Fujifilm to have this one analytical culture.
It's not happening that fast, and actually it is one Fujifilm. is something that we're all striving to achieve. It's a phrase that we have. But when I started, first of all, we were not Fujifilm, but it was just one company, and data science is one of the global teams. So we support the US quite a bit, but we also have Denmark. Denmark have their own data analytics. They very rarely reach out for me, but it's really difficult between many Fujifilms, which is the reality, and one Fujifilm. So, you know, there's a clash between different people in different functions. It's very difficult to impose your way. So you have to meet, you know, middle ground. You have to compromise. And for us, we work for customers externally. So we don't have projects that belong to us, they belong to many people. I would typically work on 5, 10 different projects, and all this data cannot be shared. So it's quite difficult, and also the customers have their own way of doing things. So again, we have to meet in the middle, so we can't push our own analytical culture.
When it comes to disseminating a unified culture, what have you found works and what doesn't?
Right, so I think I'm a little bit of this like hippie statistician. When I first started, I really wanted to train people, and I had this like little dream that I would train these people and they would just love the stats, and then they would train the people around them, and they would just spread like a, you know, wave of statistical love. But this grassroots system, I think it's good in theory, but it doesn't always work. It works to some extent. The other way we have the more grassroots system is this community of practices. So we have one for data analytics. I think there's a data advocate, and then there's a jump one. But that's a bit similar. You get a lot of taking in at the start, and then if you don't drive it, it fizzles out. So I think you need a big critical mass, lots of people buying in, and then it sustains, or somebody who's always driving it, which is very difficult for a very small team to do. And then the other way, and that has been mentioned by the other people here, is top-down. If you have management saying, do this. So when I first started, I delivered my very first basic stats course, and I came into the room, and at the back of the room there was somebody from the leadership team. I was terrified because I didn't expect a person like this to be on my course, and at the end of the course he came to me, and I was even more terrified. I thought I was going to get told off or something, and to my surprise he was like, I think everybody in R&D should take this course. And 2 days later it was on the core training for R&D. And it's like that fast. If it comes from the top down, it just happens so quickly, and it's still on the core R&D training to this day. So yeah, that works.
What do you see as the optimal balance between providing statistical support to scientists and versus kind of training them to analyze their own data independently?
Yeah, so I was quite surprised and a bit jealous when Mariana said we train people and then we send them on their own way, because for us it's definitely another in-between type of thing happening. So we train people and sometimes send them on their own way, but we do still provide quite a lot of support, and a lot of people don't really want to do the statistics. They really want us to do it. What I do insist on is participation. So I think for me, and I don't know if it's because of the way we work and working for customers, the best thing is multidisciplinary teams. We do a lot of DOEs, and I can make and produce DOEs quite well. That's my forte. But then people internally know the processes, and they know how to execute the experiments. And then our external customers, they have needs and they know what they want. If you get those three types of people in the room, I think you really get the best out of the stats. And a big bonus of doing things this way is that once the DOEs have been run and the data has come back, because everybody was on that call at the start, presenting the results is so much easier, and you get much more interest, basically. People feel involved. They feel like it's also their DOE, not just work that has been done and then presented back to them.
I hear that scripting has really played a key role in Fujifilm's progression towards analytics maturity over the years. Why is automation so pivotal in this transforming of the culture?
Yeah, so I think I've spoken to a few people here, and every time I actually admit I'm not very good at scripting, but I still have to do it most days. And actually, I was thinking back, and the JUMP conferences I've attended, and I've been to a few, every time I've done a presentation, it has been an add-in or a script. And then I was like, wow, we do a lot of scripting to make things. I think last year we did a presentation on an add-in to calculate impact ratios. That's not something that's in JUMP, so it's added on at the end of a DOE to look at the impact of your factors, not just how statistically significant your models are. I think the year before I had a multivariate tossed script I presented, and a couple years before that a half-life had I created. But I'd say the scripting that we use the most is either part of a workflow where you do some things with your data, it might do some things in Excel, and then you have scripts that you run, chunks of scripts, to make things much easier. So maybe, changing the names of 30 columns of variables to something that makes sense, or adding units. And right now, the one that probably is most used as Fujifilm is a collection of scripts to go from having a lot of data that's piled up from batch records all the way to having everything ready to go into a continuous verification report. So that would be SPC, but because it's not in time, it's more like monitoring. Those graphs take a long time to produce, and with a script you can do it in a few minutes, which is important because a lot of the time little things change or things get added on and you need to run it again and again.
What advice would you give to someone who's kind of just at the beginning or in the early stages of automating their organization's analytics workflows?
I think start small and talk to people. So I think that's I'm not a data scientist. I'm a chemical engineer and with some statistics training. But I think the hardest job for a data scientist is to understand what people need from what they want, basically. So you really need to know what they want. You need to reach for the leadership team because people might want something and you might be willing to help them, but everybody needs time to do that. I'm very lucky, my line manager gives me time, but the people who pull out of the labs don't always get given the time. And a really important thing I found, because to be honest, we struggle with this so much, is you write a workflow and it works beautifully for a project, and then you want to use this again, and there's just so many tweaks you have to do. So when you write things, comment, to the death and think about, if I have to generalize this or tweak it in the future, how can I do this easily? What if it's not me? How can somebody do it easily?
So last question is to think back to where Fujifilm was maybe 10 years ago. What is one thing that you know now that you wish you had known back then?
Well, let's come back to the beginning. Maybe I shouldn't have been such a hippie statistician. So I think getting buying at a higher level is really important. And I'm starting, after all this time, I'm finally starting to get better with this. So a few weeks ago, we were renewing our jump licenses, and we had jump over for a jump day. And they were two of the younger staff, and one of them is actually in the room somewhere, and another one in the room. And we were talking with our sales rep, France, and they just blurted out at the same time, everybody should have jump. And I was like, yeah, I know, but how do we do that, right? And we started small. We went to their manager, so not all the way to the top of their leadership, and we said, we think for this group, people are motivated, why don't we get them all a jump license? Because it's quite spread out. It's just a few people per team right now. We'll get all 20 people a jump license, and they will get face-to-face training and support in chunks of 2 hours, so it's not too much of their time, so that they become sort of super users. So hopefully this will eventually spread out.
Great. Thank you so much, Gwen.
Thank you.
This was really, very useful and insightful. So
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone. Please ask questions. And, great.